Oh, okay. So it's come to my attention recently that a lot of people aren't educated on the subject of drift-specific alignments. So today I thought I'd go over briefly drift-specific alignments and why we run the alignments that we do on our drift cars. The first thing that we're going to be going over is the camber on the front end of the car. So the whole point behind the camber that we run on the front end of the car is to maximize our contact patch while we're drifting, so that way we have as much grip from our front tires as we can possibly get. As you'll see on this car, this specific car is running negative 10.5 degrees of camber up front, and the reason it's running so much is so that way while I'm drifting and my wheels are turned, my lead wheel has a flat contact patch and I can maximize the grip out of these front tires. Now, the reason that the front wheel gains so much positive camber is due to caster. So the way the caster is set up, the front wheels actually roll over on themselves and gain positive camber. So what we look for when we're drifting is while we're actually sideways and our lead wheel is pointed forward and then our wheels are turned, because of the caster, we gain all that positive camber, and now my negative 10.5 degrees of camber turns into a perfectly flat contact patch, and I get the most out of my front tires. What I'll do right now is actually turn my car to full lock so you can see how it gains positive camber with the car turning. Okay, so as you saw me turn the wheel, it actually gained positive camber, so I ended up turning my negative 10.5 degrees of camber up front down to a 0 degree camber, and I have a perfectly flat contact patch. This is only at half lock, so with more angle, I actually roll over and start running positive camber and start riding on my sidewall. Something to mention though is that not every single drifter is going to want to maximize their contact patch while they're drifting, just depending on their style. So if you're the type of person that wants to do a lot of backwards entries, you're probably going to want to dial out your negative camber while static, so that way when you're actually drifting and on lock, you run more on your sidewall. The reason you would want to do that is so while you're doing your backwards entry, your front tires can actually slide rather than having a bigger contact patch and them actually gripping up, and they'll cause you to spin out. Now at this point you may be wondering why there's some pro drifters out there that are running YSFAB and don't have that much static camber. The reason being is that this positive camber gain all has to do with the amount of caster on your car. The thing with YSFAB is YSFAB actually creates a false caster trail by repositioning the mounting point of the hub in front of where the ball joint and the coilover mounting location are. This way they can run half the amount of caster up front, but yet still have all these self-steer characteristics that caster has to offer because they still have the caster trail built into their knuckle design. The benefit of that is they have significantly reduced the side effect of positive camber gain because of caster, so they can run less static camber now and yet still maintain a flat contact patch throughout their angle. Now, one of the side effects of running this much negative camber up front is that it actually reduces your turn-in, and that's just because when you're running like negative 10.5 degrees of camber up front, for example, you actually significantly reduce your contact patch, and with a lower contact patch, you guys basically have less grip, and with less grip, you understeer more, which means that in your initiation, you're not going to be able to flick as hard because you seriously just can't grip up in the front. However, with me running this much camber up front, I can still flick the car in plenty hard, so to me, that side effect isn't really noticeable. Another downside to running this much camber up front is that you significantly reduce your contact patch in a straight line. So what this is going to do is it's going to make it extremely easy for you to lock up your front wheels while you're braking. That really isn't a big issue when you have a track-specific drift car because we're never actually going to be braking for long distances in a straight line. And that's the same reason that you'll never see professional drifters really running big brake kits. They'll actually run like super small, super lightweight brakes because the only benefit to running huge calipers and discs up front is so that way you can have better heat dissipation. But you're not going to need that heat dissipation because you're never in a braking zone that's going to be a few hundred feet, slowing your car down from like 130 down to 30 miles an hour. So this much negative camber up front isn't an issue for track-specific drift cars. However, if you have a daily driver that, let's say 99% of the time you're driving on the street, and maybe 1% of the time you're actually drifting on the track, probably not the safest thing to do is run this much negative camber up front. So let's say if something were to jump out in front of you on the road, child crosses the street randomly, you're not going to have the same braking performance as you would if you were running less camber. What I would suggest if you have a daily driven car is to probably not run more than -6 degrees of camber. And honestly, if you have a daily driven car, you're probably not going to go out on the track anyways and do 65-degree entries on it. So contact patch like that shouldn't really be your main concern either if it's a daily driver. Now that I've gone over front camber, I'm going to move on to rear camber. So the main goal again with rear camber is to maintain a flat contact patch. With a flat contact patch, you can get even tire wear. Even tire wear, you get the most grip out of your tire, you get the most money out of your tire, you wear the tire evenly. It's a good day. Right here on this setup, I'm running -0.5 degree of camber in the back, and that's so I have completely even tire wear while drifting. Now, the common misconception here between drift cars and grip cars is that grip cars can actually run like -3 degrees of camber in the back, and with the centrifugal force, as you can imagine, going through a corner, goes perpendicular to the car and causes body roll, and that makes an even contact patch for a grip car during a corner. However, in the case for drift cars, the force is applied differently, and it's not actually perpendicular to the car while cornering. It's actually more aimed towards the back, so we can get away with running -0.5 degree of camber, or even 0 or even positive camber, and we'll still maintain even tire wear. Now, I know that may be a little bit hard to grasp without a vector diagram, however, try to picture it. So this is my tire right here that I run on this car, and this is at -0.5 degree of camber, and you can actually see the tire wear right here. So I can actually dial out my camber to probably around 0, and it can make it even tire wear, but this is just an example to show you guys how the tire wears out. So like I said, whatever camber you're going to run is in order to maximize your contact patch and make the tire wear evenly. So in my case, it's going to be -0.5 to probably around 0 degrees of camber in order to get this tire to wear evenly. Now, some pro cars that are running, let's say, in excess of 1,000 horsepower, they squat so hard under power while they're drifting that they actually need to run positive camber on the rears of their car. So that way, once they're actually in the corner and drifting and they squat down super hard, putting down their 1,000+ horsepower, their car flattens out and they get a nice even contact patch, and they get to maximize the grip out of their tires because they are limited on their tire size. And this goes so far in competitive drifting as far as limiting tire size in order to try and maximize your grip and all this sort of stuff, that they'll actually run as low as like 11 PSI in their rear tires in competition, just so that way they can have the tire flatten out as flat as possible and maximize their grip. Some people, however, will use negative camber in the back in order to lessen their contact patch so they can make it easier to drift on their cars. Okay, you don't have to do that. There's 2 ways in order for you to make it easier to drift on your car. You can basically bump the PSI up in the rear, or you can add negative camber. The reason that I wouldn't add or recommend adding negative camber is just because then you end up getting uneven tire wear. So rather than getting a nice even tire wear with high pressure on your tires, you can run your tires, let's say 30 PSI instead, and you'll get uneven tire wear. Then you have to take your tires off, have them remounted on the opposite side, and then you can go out there and then run again. So rather than doing that and having to remount your tires and do that whole sort of deal, you can actually just run a ton of PSI in your rear tires, run it at 0 camber or whatever, get nice even tire wear, and you don't have to take off your tires and put them on the other side. So as you can see here, this is nice even tire wear. Of course, still need to dial out the camber a little bit, but this is on a 225/40/18 tire, and that's using a car that has 140 horsepower in it with a KA24DE naturally aspirated. This tire is inflated to usually around 75 to 80 PSI on a track day in order for it to not grip as hard. The tire is technically only safely rated for around like 50 PSI, but you can just go ahead and ignore that. There's a lot of people that'll even run their tires up to 100 PSI and drift on them. No problem with that. And I'd recommend, again, bumping up the PSI. I still get even tire wear. I can still slide on my car with 225s in the rear, and I don't have to take these tires out and then remount them on the other side in order to get the full life out of them. Now, if you're running a drift car, a lot of times you can get adjustable rear upper control arms in the rear. So these ones specifically for an S13 are by ISR Performance, and these give a lot more adjustability over stock, so that way we can dial out the camber and run it at -0.5. Okay, that wraps up a quick overview of camber and drift cars and why we run the alignments that we run. So to sum that up, it's all about getting a nice even contact patch while drifting, whether that's negative camber up front or even positive camber in the rear. Okay, that's good. If you're actually going to be daily driving the vehicle, probably don't go over -6 degrees of camber up front because, what? Why are you shaking your head?
I didn't say anything.
Oh.